Tonight is our roundtable on local voices on housing for the Perth Sustainability Hub. And I begin with the land acknowledgement. We meet on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the neutral Attawaddaron peoples, settled according to the dish with one spoon law in effect in the Americas since at least the 12th century. All peoples sharing this territory are expected to take only what they need, to leave enough for others, and to peacefully protect the viability of the land for future generations. We are the Perth County Sustainability Hub. For those of you who are new, we are a group of organizations and individuals. And basically, we're just trying to keep connected and finding out what others are doing. You can, there's our URL for our webpage is down at the bottom if you want to know what we're up to. I would like to thank the Future Ground Network. It's an organization of the Suzuki Foundation. They're supporting this meeting. We can have long meetings because they support our Zoom station. And what the Future Ground Network does for us is basically what we'd like to do for our community. It helps us with our web and media skills, with our social media presence. Actually, you know, what they're doing is what we're doing. We want to help others have a voice. We have a web page and we're working quite hard on our news page. You can see there Jane Marie Mitchell with a certain person that you might recognize that we went to the conference a couple of weeks ago, and Jane Marie is going to be telling us about that at our next working meeting. We're also connecting to other organizations in Southwestern Ontario, to the west of us mostly, like London, Blue Bayfield, Green Goderich, and a new organization that we're a part of called GREEN, the Growing Rural Environment Action Network. Mike Sullivan will begin, Jason Davis will follow, and we'll finish with Nicole. I'd like to remind you that I'm collecting links, references, anything you have to say about housing that you would like, you know, added to this presentation. Put it in the chat. We'll collect it up and we'll have the recording of this up within a week and all the links and things that we collect during our discussion. I'd like to remind you, this isn't a lecture, it's a discussion. It's a collaborative effort. We're learning from our neighbors, but they're neighbors who've really done their homework. So they know what they're talking about. So we're starting out with Mike Sullivan, who's going to give us a general introduction. Mike worked for CBC and one of its unions, and then became MP for York South-Weston. Later on, he completed a master's in environmental studies, and he lives in Stratford. Mike, would you like to?
I do live in Stratford. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of kind of where the law is at and where Stratford is at. And those are two very important things, and they're a little bit different, but becoming not so much so. 2 years ago today, in fact, the City Council on June 14th, 2021, adopted a report from the folks that invest Stratford. It was called a Roadmap for Attainable Market Housing Development. And essentially, it was not very similar to the one that was adopted, that was received again a month ago. But it essentially asked that council look into finding ways to give money and relief to developers to create something called attainable housing. Council asked them to come back with a definition of attainable housing, which they hadn't done. And these incentives that they were talking about giving developers would be in the guise of a community improvement plan. And a community improvement plan is a way around legislation that prevents councils from incenting developers. They're not allowed to give money away. But if they call it a community improvement plan, they can get away with it. So reduced or eliminated development charges, parkland dedication, and property taxes were among the things they looked at. There was also a suggestion that the city give away land to developers. By that, I mean at half price, but who knows what half price would be. Then the city asked for funding from the government, the provincial government gave them funding to do this study. And it was funding from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. What they've got to do with housing is beyond me, but that's who gave them the money. And Stratford agreed in March of 2022 to this contract with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. Then in May of 2022, we see a definition of attainable housing from Invest Stratford. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it says attainable housing is housing that is affordable to the level of income of the household. Not affordable generally, just how much money do you have? This is what you can afford. Available, so it's on the market. Appropriate, meaning it's big enough. And actionable, in that it's an option that a household can put into action. There was absolutely no reference whatsoever to the level of availability or affordability or anything like that. So I asked several times the Invest Stratford director, Joni Gerber, isn't this market housing? And she kept saying, no, it's this, but it is market housing. If you can afford it and you can buy it, that's market housing. There was no reference whatsoever to anything else. Then on May 8th, there was a new report from Invest Stratford, and now they've defined attainable as being 90% of market. And as I pointed out to them at the meeting, 90% of this year's market, of last year's market, is exactly this year's market. So if you had given a whole bunch of incentives to developers last year, they could sell market at a profit. They could sell at a bigger profit, because even though they'd gotten all these incentives, all this money from the city, the market itself had shifted so that 90% was now today. They also, in this report, redefined affordable as 80% of market price or market rent. Right now, Stratford has a bylaw that says affordable is no more than 30% of a person's income, or a household income. And woe betide them if they adopt this new definition, because that's 80% of market is unreachable for most and is not affordable for anybody. The province then, at the same time that Invest Stratford was doing this, the province introduced a new definition of affordable housing and called it 80% of market price. They also set out the term attainable in the legislation, but they didn't really define it. They just said it's not rental, and it's housing that is at arm's length between buyer and seller. But then I assume they're going to define it later, but they haven't yet. And in fact, that portion of the law is not yet law. The most egregious thing just happened, which is that the province has proposed a new provincial policy statement for land use, including housing. And in that proposed provincial policy statement, they have removed the definition of affordable. The policy statement used to say that affordable was 30% of income. Now they're going to take it out. And we have an extra 60 days. We have until the middle of August to comment, should anyone want to comment, and Sharon will put the link on the website, I'm sure, so that people can see it. Therefore, the only definition left of what is affordable is the one from Bill 23 that says it's 80% of market. So it's completely unaffordable for most if it's 80% of market. When rents for a one-bedroom apartment are now $2,400, 80% of that is still $2,100. How's anybody going to afford that? It's just, it's crazy. And it's not affordable to somebody who, unless they're making $70,000 or $80,000 a year. And if they want to buy a house, they need to have about, I think, $160,000 a year of income, even to buy something that's labeled affordable or attainable. Stratford did not, interestingly, they did in like 2 years ago, they adopted the report. This time they said, we're receiving it for information. So in my view, that means they didn't actually adopt the new definition proposed to them of 80% of market as being affordable. They received it for information, asked senior staff to work on it. And they also have not indicated that they intend to repeal the existing affordable housing bylaw, but who knows what this council will do. What this all means is we have a big dog's breakfast of proposals and definitions from both the province and the city. We're no closer to building truly affordable housing. And the bylaw is in conflict with the existing bylaw, is in conflict with as yet unenacted provincial definition. The proposals that Joni Gerber is putting together are now significantly reduced or eliminated due to the provinces giving a builders a free ride on development charges. That was the other part of Bill 23. If a builder builds attainable or affordable housing, they don't have to pay the city anything. They don't have to pay any development charges. They don't have to pay parkland dedication. And those two things were part of what Joni was putting in her toolkit. So those have been taken away. The only really good news that I could see in that Invest Stratford proposal, and it's existed for the last 2 years, is the option for council itself to build affordable housing, which would be significantly cheaper than any developers building it. And others smarter than me are going to talk later about what other options that the city should put forward. So unless anybody has any questions about all this dog's breakfast of legislation, that's it from me.
I just want to quickly ask you to speak to the part of the definition that contradicts the provincial definition of attainable with the whole rental thing.
Right. Oh, yes, they haven't.
Out. Yeah, go ahead.
So Stratford's definition of attainable includes the notion that attainable housing could be rental housing. But the provincial definition specifically excludes rental housing from the word attainable. I don't know what that would mean. It may give Stratford more flexibility, or it may take flexibility away. I really don't know what, if the city of Stratford decides to create attainable, in their words, 90% of market rental housing, then the province may say, no, you can't. Or the province may say, well, you do what you want because our definition of attainable is different from yours. Nobody knows. And when I asked the ministry for specific questions about the act, they told me to talk to the city. And the city said, we don't know. I finally had to write to the MPP. He wrote to the people who gave me my letter, who gave me a different letter, which said, oh yeah, none of that's been enacted yet. It's the definition of attainable, affordable, and development charges is not yet law. And we don't know when it will be. So it's still all up in the air. But thanks for raising that.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Mike, that age-old question, who benefits? Am I hearing this right, that the key benefactor here are developers, in that if the definitions of affordable and attainable, wherever they fall, are so high, so close to market value, that then developers can easily meet any leftover obligation to include affordable or attainable housing in their development, easy peasy, even though it doesn't bear any resemblance to truly affordable or attainable housing. And the province can make the claim that they're insisting on affordable housing in any future developments, even though they're not really attainable. Is that who's benefiting, developers principally?
I think principally those seem to be the friends of Mr. Ford. The city of Stratford's proposal, which had the undefined attainable, was also very much aimed originally at developers, at giving developers some money and in the hopes that they'd build something cheaper without any real structure as to what was cheaper. But the province now seems to have taken that definition out from under the city. And so ultimately, if the city decides to go on its own and to build housing itself, or with a nonprofit, or with United Way, or in some cooperation, or a land trust or something, I think there's some room for some great things, but I don't know if the province will let them.
Wait, can the city be controlled by the province in even an attempt to build its own housing?
The minister has incredible powers now, and the minister has automatic right to an MZO, can overrule councils on housing issues. So I don't know whether the minister would, but and our MPP is actually the assistant to the minister, so you better ask him.
That'll get me places.
Yeah.
The other piece of that is they took away a lot. I mean, if we go the route of appeasing or incentivizing developers, they no longer have to pay us the money for us to build affordable on our own. So that's like an added cost that comes to us, or it doesn't make sense, right? So like, we give you these incentives, we have no way to ensure that you're going to build anything that's affordable, and you've also taken away some of the money that we would use to build affordable, or to maintain parklands, or to do all those kinds of things, develop in charges. So
you understand it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Other questions? Whew. Well, it's already looking pretty murky here. We're going to go on to Jason and see if he can cheer us up. Jason Davis is interested in politics. He ran for council in the last election. He's also a diesel technician, and his passion is fixing transports and farm equipment. He rents in Stratford.
Hi, everyone. All right, so let's just get right into this because there's a bit to cover. First things first, I went over a lot of information about like statistical analysis of what's happening with the housing prices at a presentation to council, which can be provided to you if you would like to see that and you want to get the nitty-gritty of the numbers of what is really causing the housing inflation that we're seeing. This is going to be more of an overview on what all three levels of government should be doing and what they're currently doing, and where to look and keep an eye. So first things first, I'm sure everyone saw or might have seen most recently that Poilievre and the Liberals were going back and forth arguing about whose red tape and whose actions were causing less houses to be built to inflate the market. And Doug Ford was talking about paving the green belt so that he can build more homes, so that he can stop the housing inflation. So the question then gets raised, does building more homes reduce the cost of housing? And do we have a shortage of housing? Well, just a real quick refresher. In 2011, we had 12,851,821 citizens in Ontario. In 2021, we have 14,223,942. That's a difference over 10 years of 9.7%. As for housing, in 2011, we had 4,887,508 homes. In 2021, we have 5,651,648. That's a difference of 13.5%. So we have been building more homes than we have been adding to our population consistently for a decade. Right now, if we look at Canada-wide vacant homes, the most recent study was done in 2021, and it showed that we have 1.3 million vacant homes in Canada. 400,000 of those vacant homes are in Ontario. Ontario has the largest number of vacant homes in the entire country, representing almost 40% of them. 8% of all homes in Canada right now are vacant. Now, this does not count multi-dwelling units like long-term care facilities, student housing. That's not counted in that number. Those are apartments or houses. 8% of all of them are empty. In contrast, our homeless population in Canada is only around 300,000. So we would still have 1 million homes left. We provided one to every single homeless person. Every night, between 25,000 and 35,000 Canadians sleep on the street. And annually, homelessness costs taxpayers $7 billion a year. The increase in cost of housing from 2016 to 2021 went up by 202%. In 5 years, we increased our housing costs 202%. Now I'm going to break down the 3 levels of government, what they're currently doing, what they can be doing. And when I'm talking municipalities, I'm also going to be very specific on Stratford. The number one thing that the municipalities need to be doing is to not designate any land as excess so it can be sold to developers, period. Just don't do it. The municipality owns the land. Do not give that land to developers under any circumstances ever again, period. We have a finite number of land. We do not have, and that's it. If we keep building what we're building, we're going to run out this problem without fixing it and run out of land. On top of that, there's the supply issues. All of the costs for builds of homes have been increasing because we've been building so many more homes than before. We used to only build about 67,500 homes a year. We're now building over 100,000 a year under Doug Ford. So we've been consistently building almost double, 40% increase, 33% increase in homes, and yet the cost of housing is still going up. So building homes isn't fixing the problem. We need to look at new avenues for creating homes as a municipality and regulating the sales of those homes, as well as looking at things like tiny homes for homeless individuals and doing things like we did during wartime, which is where we built smaller homes for families that were more affordable and weren't sold directly on the open market. The presented plan for attainable housing that the Invest Stratford and them have recently brought forward doesn't do anything innovative. It is, they've looked at 3 options. 1 is give the land to developers and hope for the best. 2 is spend $71 million building our own affordable housing. And 3 was hope that a non-for-profit decides to come in and save us. These options, this shouldn't be the only options you have at all. We should be looking at building homes to sell as well and using that money to fund building affordable homes that we rent. We also need to start to try to beat provincial regulations. Like the city might still have a bylaw that says affordable is 30% of your income, but the new building in Britannia which is registered as affordable, isn't registered at 30% of someone's income. It's not. It can be up to 40% of someone's income based on the income brackets that they provided to us and the cost of the apartments. They're not following their own bylaw. They've switched directly. This was built under the previous legislation, under the previous regulations. And yet the day that we were able to list it with a new price that was increased, we did. And there's no need for that. Municipalities don't have to charge the maximum amount they can.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to regulate the number of short-term rental licenses given by municipality or given by ward in larger cities. Municipalities in some cities have seen as high as 60% increase in the number of short-term rentals like Airbnb. 31,000 long-term rentals were turned to short-term rentals in 2019 alone across Canada. A March 2020 study compiled in the US found that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings equals a 0.018% increase in rental costs and a 0.0026% increase in housing prices overall for the entire municipality. That's per percentage. So when we have municipalities having a 60% increase, those numbers add up very quickly. As for the provincial government has increased the homes from 67,000 to 100,000 in just the last few years. And what's happening with that is landlords are buying new homes and expecting tenants to cover that mortgage, even though these new homes are coming in at so much higher price points because we're building so many and supply issues are rising. And so wood's gone up, everything else has gone up. Houses are now being more expensive, and the new landlords expect people to come in and cover their investment when they buy an overly inflated property. When that happens, other landlords look at that, and while they might have owned their property for 20 years, they say, why is this guy charging 3,000 when I'm charging 700? This incentivizes them to do things like rent evictions and stating that they're going to be moving in family or whatever they need to do to get the tenants out so that they can jack the price of rent up as high as they possibly can. Not to mention that the Ford government ended rent control on properties built after, I forget which month it was, but it was the 15th day in 2018. So now new properties do not have any form of rent control. Jessica Biel and the NDP has tabled a bill, Bill 48, which it's called rent control for all tenants. And that would then reestablish that all properties, regardless of date they're built, would be under the same legislation for rent control. So I would suggest that you show your support to that bill and publicly share it out that you would like Bill 48 to go forward. The NDP has also spoken to tabling legislation that would regulate rent increases in between tenants. Now, this would be vitally important because it would stop people from being incentivized to do rent evictions or pretend to move in families so that they can get new tenants in. And it would make it so that the entire rental market doesn't bubble when more people are being overturned so that they can increase prices. Another thing that we should look at doing or look at getting your province to do is having them block credit checks for landlords. Plain and simple, that's just a way to make people homeless. Credit checks are as old as I am. I'm 33. That's how long we've had credit checks for. This system went from being something we just developed to being something that makes people homeless in 33 years. With removing a lot of these things, such as rent evictions or moving in family, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up having a lot less good tenants get evicted for the purpose of wealth. And in doing so, we will reduce the total number of people that are going through the court system trying to fight evictions. And doing that, it also helps landlords because it allows landlords to get bad tenants out by not flooding the market with good tenants that are just trying to get kicked out to raise funds. Another thing we need to do is we need to fight the province to redefine affordable to be related to household income, not the market. You cannot have affordable housing in relation to the market because the market does whatever it wants to do. And I don't know about the rest of you, but my wages haven't gone up 202% in 5 years. Last thing we need to do, or another thing we need to do for the province is we need to tell Doug Ford that when he doubled the rent increase in 2023 to 2.5%, that was a one-time thing after rent was frozen during the pandemic, and it needed to go back down to 1.2 to 1.3% annual increases and not stay at 2.5% going forward and pretend like that's just what the number always was. He doubled it and it needs to go back down for 2024. As far as what the federal government can do, the federal government needs to expand its rent-to-own program and work directly with municipalities so that when municipalities build these smaller affordable homes, they can go to first-time home buyers using the rent-to-own program so that for the first 5 years of their payments are actually them only paying for their down payment so they don't gain ownership for 5 years, which means they can't move in and 6 months later sell the property at full fair market value. It can also use regulations to stop it from being an income property and expand on those as necessary to make sure that these homes are going where they need to be and regulating prices. Another way to do this without relying on the federal government is doing community land trust, which Nicole will talk to later. That is a completely viable alternative option, but one way to do it is expanding our rent-to-own program the federal government's already doing as close as Kitchener. The federal government should also ban price fixing softwares in the rental market. We have companies like YieldStar, which owns most of the market for rental price fixing. It was created by a man named Jeffrey Roper, who was arrested and charged for price fixing when he was in charge of the airline Atlantic. If you remember back in the day, airlines were caught price fixing and some people got charged for it. He was one of them. What did he do? He went and created a program which price fixes the rental market. And as of 2016, it was already representing over 20 million units in Canada and the US. And it just went public a few years ago and is evaluated at $10.5 billion. So in the last 5 years, we have created a $10.5 billion company, and its only job is regulating the cost of rental markets in order to increase revenue. They found what it used to be that rental prices would try to keep occupancy at 100% so they could have the max money coming in. They found that actually, if you just raise the price to an astronomical amount, then you might have more vacancy. They saw a 15% increase in turnover in any property that started using the service in the first year. However, even though you have a higher vacancy rate, everyone else that's there is paying more, so it's fine. The federal government can easily identify that as price fixing and ban it. It's starting in Canada. They've already started their operations as close as Mississauga are now using the software, and we need to ban that quickly because it is price fixing. Plain and simple. There's no argument that it's anything else. And those are where we are in the 3 levels of government, what they're doing, and some things we should support and some things we should get on them about doing. Yep.
Question?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Well, 1 comment and a question. Well, no, 2 comments. And also I just want to note that Ken has a couple questions for you in the chat. So 1, I'm going to talk about community land trust. I want to say that rent to own programs within community land trust is also a thing. So you can, so that's a thing that should be kept in mind. And the other thing is about rent evictions. This is one of the concerns that I've been raising with the Attainable Housing Project for some time, and I haven't got a clear answer. But to my mind, and this is kind of a question, I put this out to other folks who've been following this stuff. It seems as though they may, if they do not regulate this correctly, create the opportunity for current landlords to rent evict their tenants and say, well, we want to renovate, we want to whatever, and then join their program, get all these incentives, and be able to charge much more. Because right now, a lot of us are paying less than the astronomical, although still unaffordable, prices for our rentals because we moved into, let's just say, subpar housing and then had to fight to get it fixed or fix it ourselves. Now, they said in there that they were going to incentivize renovations and all of that sort of thing. If landlords decide to renovate tenants like us, then they get funds from the Attainable Housing Project to fix everything up nice. But now the rate at which they can charge is much higher because attainable and or affordable based on, you know, these new definitions is much higher than what we're paying. They're causing a lot more of us to just be homeless and in a market where we can't afford anything. And I haven't got like a clear answer on how they intend to address that. That's very concerning to me.
Yeah, so there's a couple things for that. Number 1 is you could always implement legislation that are things called like right to return, which means that if you are removing someone for the purpose of renovations, they have the right to return at the price point that they were before they were removed for the purpose of renovations. However, the program you're talking about that the government's looking at now, where they give out funds to renovations to create, that one is to create apartments in homes that don't currently have them. So like renting your basement to turn your basement into, renovating your basement to turn it into a basement apartment. It can't already be an apartment in order to gain those funds.
Okay.
So no one under those circumstances should be evicted because no one should legally be living there at the time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that program isn't a problem with it so much. However, going forward, there are always programs like that if we wanted to do things about renovating places, but I don't think the government should be paying someone that's an existing landlord to renovate their apartment. We should just put in blanket laws with things like right to return, which I believe Ontario does have some form of, just not the same.
Whew,
There's lots of questions.
this is giving me a popsicle headache. You know, this is really complicated stuff. I'm wondering, Jason, if you can just, you know, there's going to be people watching this that are also getting brain freeze from all this. Is there a way we can just sort of say it in a simpler way? Can you just, you know, you've given us a lot of stuff. We'll go back over. I'm going to put out the transcript. I'm going to put in the links and people will be able to look at it. But for this recording, could you say it in a simpler way?
What we need to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first quick thing, municipalities, stop saying that you have excess land and giving it to developers, period. Number 1, do not give any land that we personally own as a municipality and taxpayers to developers anymore at all. They can try and fight over land that's privately owned. That's fine. That market can exist. No more. 2, Tell the Conservatives to stop trying to just build a bunch of McMansions all over the Greenbelt in order to make a bunch of money for their developer friends while pretending that they're attainable, and then building $800,000 McMansions next to them and calling them affordable. And 3 is tell the federal government to expand their rent to own program and put in legislation that rightfully points out that programs like Yield Star are price fixing and ban them.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I can use that as a little clip. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have a question?
There's all kinds. Oh, they have their hands up too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pam, do you have a question? And then Mike?
Hi, sure, thank you. My name is Pamela Conabare, and I'm just here as a citizen. I'm not wearing any other hats at the moment related to these topics. And I've kind of came into this conversation many years ago when Stratford started realizing they had to do something about short-term rentals, and when they first became aware of Airbnb operating in the city. And I tried to follow what they were doing at that time, but kind of fell off a little bit. And then I also don't know if they've done that much in the like 5 or 6 years that they've been working on it. But I'm wondering why, with the new bylaw that they did create around short-term rentals, why didn't they create like a limit? Or if they have, I wasn't aware of it. Like, why can't they say we can only support this many short-term rentals and kind of force, like, cap that number, knowing what the need is for housing in the community and knowing how many short-term rentals are displacing people from the rental market?
Yeah, so at the time the city council was considering the new short-term bylaw, rental agreement bylaw, I was yelling this at everyone and like working to run for city council while yelling it at everyone. I can't tell you why. Like, if you wanted to be cynical, you'd be like, oh, well, they get more money and fees per rental place and all that. But the truth is, when they passed the bylaw, they put in a regulation that said that they weren't going to be charging these fees to the places under the new licensing for the first 2 years. So they're not even, the city's not even making money from this. It's losing thousands to tens of thousands of dollars by doing it the way they did, and still didn't put limitations in. I don't know why they did. I really wish I had tried to implement them, that we had a ward system in the city before. Use that ward system so you can have higher numbers towards the downtown core, where you want to push in tourism, you want to push in people, you want to stimulate our economy. That's fine. Let millionaires and short-term renters fight it out in downtown. But the residential new builds that we have out there that are going for $250 a night on Airbnb from someone that lives in Brampton that owns it, there's no reason that that should be happening. And I argued that, I pointed it out. Their fight to that was, to me, was, well, now we're going to make it as part of the bylaw that they have to be able to get there within 30 minutes. So they can't be people from Mississauga and Brampton buying places. But at the same time, you can find ways around that. You can pay someone as your caregiver, like, to go over there. You could just ignore it and hope you don't get caught. But it is what it is. I don't know why. I tried to yell and fight and scream about it all I could, just like they tried to yell and fight and scream about how the new B&Bs were going to be stuck with 500,000 or whatever liability now, or the new 3 million, whatever it was. They changed their liability to some places that insurances won't even cover. Overall, I was very much against the way that it was presented, but that was on them and they passed it as is.
Yeah. My second question was, you mentioned vacancy rates in Canada and Ontario, but does the city know vacancy rates for, apartments that are downtown, for example, that have been empty for years, if not decades, and things like that? And can there be anything that addresses landlords and residential vacancies on the municipal level?
Yeah, I would love to see that number. I'm a diesel mechanic. I did all of this research on my own. I did get some Stratford specific numbers that I talked about when I was talking to council on like what percentage is multifamily homes, things like that. Because managed to find them during my research. I was like, yes, Stratford specific numbers, great. I can tell them that 31% of new builds are going to multifamily and multi-owned investors in Stratford. Great, I know that now. 19% of our entire market's owned by people that own more than one property. Cool. I can't tell you the vacancy rate because they just haven't done it or they haven't released it, at least not by municipality. The only municipality I know of is Toronto, and I believe that Toronto has 113,000 vacant properties right now out of the 400,000 in all of Ontario. So Toronto is a big part of that number. And don't quote me on that number. I believe I'm correct, but I am going most of this off the top of my head.
Well, yeah, it seems like here in Stratford, there is a real like problem with data. And there was when the whole question came up 6 years ago about Airbnbs and what to do about it. And they had no idea about numbers and statistics of that issue. And it seems like they haven't really made much progress in terms of understanding the data around some of these questions, which makes it really hard to make informed decisions when these bylaws are coming to councillors, when the data isn't there to really be able to answer the questions.
Yeah, I mean, before they had licensing for short-term rentals and they only had licensing for B&Bs, it was technically fairly impossible for them to check how many places were short-term rentals because they didn't have that information. Like, but now that we have the licenses going, we should get that number as well as just straight up vacancy spots. I would have hoped that when we paid companies to come in and make the plans for our affordable and attainable housing, they would find these numbers because, you know, I don't get paid to do what I'm doing, so I shouldn't have better numbers than them. But I haven't seen anything released.
Mike, did you have a question?
A comment kind of question. It's that the federal government used to be the #1 builder of affordable housing in Canada. And in the 60s, 70s, and before, and 80s, something between 10 and 20% of all accommodation in Canada was built by the federal government as affordable housing. And then Paul Martin just got out of the business. Over the course of Jean Chrétien's tenure, the federal government abandoned their building of affordable housing. And so anything that still exists is now in the hands of provinces and municipalities. It's all falling apart, as some of you know, and the federal government in most countries is where affordable housing is built, but not in Canada anymore. And it's worth saying something to our elected federal representatives.
Were you going to ask that question about city council? Can they increase tax rates for vacant homes? Use it or lose it kind of thing that exists for commercial?
Not so much, because I think it's been answered by Mike with his comment that they've done this elsewhere. My question is whether anybody knows if any other municipality has done any kind of statistical study to find out what is the current supply of rental housing, like how many rental units are available in the city that exist and the age of it, that kind of thing. I'm thinking kind of like the what Stratford has done, the big thing about their asset management plan, where they were looking at all the city assets. But does any other city actually kind of give us a hard number of saying we have this percentage of renters, we have this percentage of single family homeowners, and these many landlords, something like that? I've been dying to try to find out where I can find those figures.
Yeah, so I haven't specifically been able to find those. I do know that the city has the number of how many homes here are rented and like what population of the city is renting. The federal government would be able to get that for you fairly quickly though, because it's all listed on someone's taxes, which reminds me of something I forgot to mention. Yeah, so on tax reports, the landlords would put down the money they've gained, and the landlords of vacant properties or properties under renovation would write off the losses. So the federal government should be able to find that by municipality fairly easily. They would just need to compile it and release it, which is something, you know, you can definitely request if you contact your local MP. And speaking of local MPs, if you were to go, I will provide this link to Shannon as well, but if you were to go to the Maple, which is a new news organization starting in Canada, they've compiled a database of exactly which MPs are landlords and which MPs gain income from any form of investing in the housing market. You'll be surprised to know that the Conservative leader has a lot of properties that he's the landlord of. You'd also, they don't do it for the province though. However, I do have those numbers in front of me for the province. As of 2021, I don't have new ones. I don't know if our current MPP is a landlord or not, but as of 2021, 20% of all MPPs were landlords, and 13 of them were for the PCs, 8 of them for the NDP, 2 for the Liberal. Now remember, they only had 7 seats in 2021, so 2 is a pretty high percentage, and 1 independent. Those all of those MPPs personally gain wealth from increases in rents and increasing in the housing market.
And I do have that link and I will put it up.
That's awesome.
My turn?
Well, I got introduced to you.
Okay, go.
Nicole Andre is a performer who works in the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion field. Struggles with her health and housing have made her a social justice activist as well.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in because we only have 10 minutes left. This is urgent, so I should not forfeit any more older agricultural land as well, because we have a food security issue coming down the pipes as well. We need that land also for, because the thing about how, if you develop smartly, is that you also develop things like green spaces and you make sure that climate change initiatives or precautions are also incorporated in your development plan. So from here on out, no more of that. We can't afford it. We are looking at, this is urgent, because if that land starts to go, or if some of these plans get put into place, we are looking at a generation. It's not just a generation or generations of folks who will not be able to own their own homes. It's a generations of folks who are going to wonder how can they retire, because they're paying the equivalent of mortgages or more than a mortgage to rent. So it's going to be big problem for us. And on top of that, you know, if Invest Stratford is being genuine in saying that they are developing these plans to ensure that we have a workforce, because right now what we have is a lot of people who can't afford, they need the workers, but the workers can't afford to live here. This, what they've put forward so far will not work, as for the reasons that Mike and Jason have explained. We are running on low and moderate income folks, right? Single households with kids, people who work as ushers, people who work in the service industry, PSWs, orderlies, all of these people need a place to live. And, you know, Mike spoke about the fact that the governments have stopped funding affordable housing. We say that affordable housing is a human right, but it can't be a commodity and a human right. Like, if we leave this to the free market, this is what you get. And more of the same isn't going to get us out of this situation. So it's really important that we are organized and mobilized and firm in our demand that our city and our governments do better for us before we get ourselves into a situation that we won't be able to get out of. So now is the time to act, and it is not going to be enough just to like mention to your counselor or write a letter. They need to be held accountable. They are our public servants. They're supposed to serve us. And we're going to have to get organized and be demonstrable in our protest against this in order to stop this from happening. The good news is there are lots of people that want to do this stuff, and there are solutions that are proven. We're not asking for anything revolutionary here. This stuff has been done, and it's been done well. There are local, like when I say local, like, you know, within 2 hours from our own city, examples of how this works, and across the country and across the world of how this works. So we're not asking for anything, you know, out of the box. Well, maybe out of their box, but their box is very small.
Could I just say that, you know, we had a lot of talk and a lot of questions. You don't have to rush.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I just want to start off by saying that because I feel like I hear out on the streets a lot of cynicism, and that can easily turn to fatalism. And it's like, oh, they're going to do what they're going to do, and they don't listen to us. But the fact is, they need to listen to us. We elected them, and you need to remind them of that. We're watching. This is the #1 issue. If you screw this up, we're not going to vote for you again, right?
I just wondered, I'd like to ask you the question I asked to Jason. Is there part of this apathy in relation to housing because people just don't understand it? It's kind of complicated.
I mean, that might be part of it. But I think that, like, when I talk to people about some of the things that Jason said in his delegation, or, you know, these definitions of affordable and attainable, they do get it. But then they're like, oh, that's just like them to do that. Yeah. But we can't afford to kind of lay down. Like, it's not an option, you know? So that's the first thing that I want to say. I have notes. Let me split my page. So I think we need to ask, here's one thing. So when I reached out to the planning department, they told me that we are not obligated to have an attainable housing plan, and that our city already has an affordable housing improvement plan and community incentive toolkit. I've asked for that, and I'm getting some wishy-washiness. I haven't gotten it yet, unless it was in my email today, and I haven't checked for the day. I think it's important to go back and say that whatever is good in what is the beginning of a plan that Joni and Invest Stratford have put forward needs to be applied to affordable housing and to our old definition of affordable. But at least, like, what the province is saying is affordable is up to 80%. So I think that gives us more leeway to build within, like, truly affordable, basing it on people's income. So I think that we should say no. Like, we should say no if that's what attainable has to be. And I'll just say this. That definition at 90%, they're like, well, we didn't really know what they were going to say. We knew it would be between 80 and 100, so we just set it at 90. So we really have no idea what that means. And they're proposing rentals, and according to the province, that's not a thing either. So I would just, like, I would state to all when you write your counselors, let me just say this. It's their first initial, their last name @stratford.ca. I would not use those online tools because you don't get a copy, so far as I can tell, of what you send.
Good point.
Right, and there's not a paper trail there. So I would email them each, all in one, CC them all, so that you know who responds to you, and then take a note and say, what was their response? Did they respond to me? And on top of that, when it came time to vote, did what they say to me line up with how they voted? So we need to keep records of that we're opposing, and make sure that there's a record of it and that we all know, so that we can start to build some kind of capacity. Coalition? Yeah, a coalition, some collaboration on this. What else do I want to say? Let's see. Let me talk about the Community Land Trust. So I'll briefly break down what this is. So Community Land Trust is where, in this case, we're hoping that the government, any property, doesn't even have just to be land. So any property that is owned by the government, we're trying to get a list of that right now. There's a lot of affordable housing, social housing that is coming up. Their leases are coming up. So they're going to be given back to the province, to the municipality as well. So they hold the land, they own the land, but people or organizations,
Who's they?
sorry, the municipality in this case would own the land, but people or organizations can own the homes on it, the businesses on it, the social organizations on it. In some cases, like say the local, they could maybe own like the farming operation. And how they're, so it's like it's a split land trust. It's a split trust. So there's the land and then there's the housing. In this case, we're talking about affordable housing on that land. Now, those types of community land trusts are governed in 3 parts, boards that are tripartite. So 1/3 of that board is the people who, in the case of like an organization who runs whatever, the local, but in the case of housing, it would be like the people who live there. One part of that is the government, or like, and the other, not the government, that's not the word I want to use.
Municipality?
No, it's like the experts of that thing. So it might be like it might be social services in the case of housing. It might be, say the CRC was, a partner in developing on those lands. So those folks, and then the other part is the community. So the wider Stratford community. So the board is made up of that, and it's governed by that, which makes sure that when these decisions are being made, that the bulk of the deciding power is with the people who live there and use it and are part of this community. So those are the 2 things that I want to say about that. And then the other piece is that you can dedicate that land in perpetuity. So you can say forever, this will be affordable housing. It will forever be priced based on 30% or less of people's income. Do you know what I mean? You can fix that in there, and then it's forever there. So that's really important. You could do that for agricultural land, to keep food security. You can do that for a number of different things. And that's not, because what they're talking about a lot, I hear this is like, oh, well, if we do this, then for the next 10 years, it'll be affordable. Well, what happens after the 10 years? I mean, that's how we got here. That's what these when these affordable, and I mean, it's laughable what they're defining as affordable, but when that 10 years is up, that goes right out into market, and we're back to the same thing. So what we need to start doing is holding that land in perpetuity for the reasons that we need it, so that as we move forward, we don't keep, running into bigger and bigger problems and running out of land and properties. So let me see, what else do I really want to talk about? I think that there's 2 problems that we have here that we need to address simultaneously and are both urgent and we kind of need to do quickly. One is that procedural bylaws and the way that our city interacts with us is shutting us out of the decision-making process. They're consulting us last, they're consulting us the least, they are not giving us fair notice. Sometimes I think it's a little bit intentional because they're low staffed and they would rather not have all of us weighing in on stuff, slowing down their wheel, right? But then, what happens when you don't consult the people who are most impacted by the thing is then you get a bunch of pushback, and it's not working. It hasn't worked, and it's not going to start working. So that's the one thing. We are in the process of trying to, draw up better ways of engaging, draw up ways that our procedural bylaws need to be changed. We have delegated on this stuff, but at the moment we're delegating into a vacuum because we don't have any way to compel the city or our council to actually respond or to actually address the things that we're bringing up. So that's problem number 1. We have Cooper Lot, which could be a huge solution for affordable housing coming up. Our official plan is coming up. So a lot of the changes that need to happen that to make things like a community land trust or the rent to buy program, all that stuff a reality, Jason's ideas about tiny homes, all of that stuff is coming up and we're getting shut out of the conversation. So when these things come up, we don't want to, I don't want to delegate on it as this individual again. I want it to be a petition with several, you know, reach out to all the advocacy orgs in the area and with, you know, as many people as we can signed up on it, so that we are putting it forward as like a group of folks that are like, no, enough. This is what needs to happen. So that's one thing. Then the other piece is I really do think that CLTs are a really good way out of this. And you can build all different kinds. You can build tiny homes. You can build agri-hoods that involve agricultural land as well and parkland as well. You can build wartime homes. You can build more conventional, you know, you can even take housing that we already own and just make it a community land trust, right? So if there's housing already, that's already like a multiplex or a duplex or a triplex or whatever that's owned by the city, you can just make it a community land trust. I will give Sharon some links to some case studies of that, like Parkdale in Toronto, Kingston in Toronto. I know some folks at NFU are pulling out some ones for me across the country, and some that are more geared to agricultural stuff, because I think that is something that we need to be keeping in our mind as well, is that we, especially with what's happening with the green belts and all of that, whatever agricultural land that we have, while we do need housing and it's super important, we don't want to forfeit our green spaces or our food either. We need to like hold all these things at once. And I know Mike didn't talk about it, but he knows a lot about how to build green. And we need to be thinking about the future. I mean, look what's happening just with the fires, like that our homes are resilient, that they are energy efficient, because that's a huge cost for us as well. All of these things need to come to the plan. And if they would come to people like us, we have the answers, we know, because it affects us. But for some reason, we're the last and the least to be consulted. And that needs to change, and it needs to change very quickly. And we need to say that with a lot of force, because we will get to the point where it's going to be very hard to come back from. And I don't, like, you know, I worry, I have a lot of skin in this game. I don't want to see us get to that point. So yeah, I'm just looking if there's anything else. I mean, when you start to see us come up with this stuff, please share it with your friends.
Well, actually, on that point, is there some way that the Perth County Hub can help you with the petition? Can we put a petition up? Can we put a link? Can we can do a survey? We have all sorts of stuff, online stuff that we can do. So we should be talking about that.
Yeah, we should. We need to get organized. And I know, for instance, like Mike, and I don't know if Jason, you'll be able to make it because you probably don't have the kind of flexibility that we have, but EPIC has invited us to talk at the local, and they're a peer advocacy group. We're trying to really like branch out that network and get people together so that we're not like one by one going out there to delegate just for them to nod their heads and say, and then do whatever they were going to do anyways. You know?
And that means we have to get all different kinds of people together too. You know, not just young people, not just single parents, like all of us have got to be in this, because it's important to all of us.
Yeah, and write the press, write a letter, like make some noise.
We can help with that too. We could we could do a form letter that people could use.
I see lots of questions, and Jason,
yes, lots of questions.
You have a question or a comment too. Put your hand up so you don't lose you in the spot there.
Okay, we've got Jane Marie.
Hi, so first of all, I wanted to talk about the procedural bylaw. There's a survey that just dropped yesterday, I believe, or today. And so that is there for people to comment on. I haven't looked at it yet.
I'll put the link up.
We're really trying to get people to have a mass voice by emailing a lot of people, because I've gotten just one opinion as well. And it's like, okay, so I've got to create more people giving their opinion. That would help. It was from one of the counselors. That was my takeaway from him. Procedural bylaw, we're trying to give a lot of different ways of people being able to ask questions. They did include that perhaps they'll talk about an open mic. And we also want something at the other end where counselors can ask questions for updates if they've been asked about updates and stuff like that. So we are working on that, and hopefully, I don't know how long that process is going to be. They haven't told us, but I tend to use this survey thing because there's a new one every month. Actually, there's one that dropped last week about accessibility, which is sort of another issue for housing as well. And so I encourage everybody to go to Engage Stratford and fill them out. And they would say, oh, but nobody's giving us their opinion. So the more people we encourage to give an opinion, the better off we are. And
That's just engagestratford.ca, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
there's a lot of things. I mean, I had trouble getting them to like put out notices on their own. Like it was their own notice about, you know, the Attainable Housing Project's final report coming out. I couldn't get them to post it outside of City Hall. Like that's insulting. Do you know what I mean? There was things.
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to be asking them, because I pointed out in one of the delegations I made that there was in the bylaw, or it said something about how they were going to contact counselors to let them know about things, but there was no talk about the public. So we want them to include that, and hopefully a week before things are happening.
Yeah, because we don't get paid to do this. Our own counselors who are part-time only have a weekend.
Right.
So.
Okay.
And that's not enough time, especially for the size of things that have been happening.
Yeah. Ken?
Mike, oh, sorry.
Yeah, just on the subject of petitions, it's a waste of time with this current council and previous councils. They don't really listen to petitions. Maybe my sound's low.
We hear you.
Yeah, there we go. They don't listen to petitions, so I think that's a wasted effort. But yes, they are looking at a procedural bylaw, and they're going to try to change things so that more people can delegate properly. But I'd also like to point out that it was mentioned that if you send a message to your counselors and stuff, you don't get a response. If you do that individually, that's certainly true. They have no obligation to respond or acknowledge. And I think previous administration was trying to pretend that everything was responded to within 24 hours. And that's not true. But this time, if you go to the website, and I put it in the chat, contact City Council and go down to the bottom and email all council, you will get an acknowledgement from the city clerk that you at least sent that email. And that helps. Other than that, I think delegations is probably the best way to go, but be well prepared for it. Understand where the councillors are going to have objections to things. They're very focused on the budget right now because the latest thing about the predicted deficit is $308,000 by year end. And that's pretty much because they've hired a whole bunch of new planning people. And they're looking at the dollars and cents. That seems to be their focus on everything. The procedural bylaw is going to be investigated, but the way they've set it up, it looks like there's going to be open consultation with the public, but this will probably drag on so that there won't be a change to the bylaw until next year, from what I can see.
They've been changed with every term, and we're like several terms in and nothing. But I will say, I have to kind of disagree with you on contacting, because so I would add, when you're contacting each of your counselors, CC the clerk as well, because the problem is the clerk responds, but I'm not sure how that translates to the rest of them. I know I don't get a copy of it. I don't know who gets to see it. This way I know exactly like all of them received it, and then I can track who responds to me, which counselors are responding to me. And I don't know, like delegating isn't working either, because we can speak and be very well prepared, but we have no way to compel them to even respond with a report.
Ask a question.
Yeah, ask a question, address. And so I would say that we do need to delegate as well, but we need to have, because even if they might not respond to a petition that has 100 names, 200 names, 1,000 names on it, the press can also pick that up. And so I do think we need to take both. It's not that I disagree with you, but I think we need to take both tacks at the same time to get some kind of traction. Jason, you had your hand up for a while, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on community land trusts, just some more intriguing information, make people more likely to go share and click the information that you're going to share about community land trusts. Because one big misconception with community land trusts is that you can't own property in a community land trust. A family can purchase and own a home, and they can even make renovations and improvements to that home within a community land trust. The only thing is, if they choose to sell the home, the board of a community land trust, which is made up of its own members, can decide what the price point of that home is. So you can't match inflation by going up 200% on your home from 250 to 500,000. You can go there when you go to sell your home and say, this is how much I've spent on improvements in my home, and they'll make sure you recoup that, and possibly a small amount of inflation, but you won't match the median average we have annually of about 12%. So that is one really common misconception with community land trusts, and one of the reasons why I like them as one of the options. However, they can be difficult when it comes to managing them, self-management and stat. But the best part about it is you can own a home, you can get a mortgage, you can do all of those things. It is your property. You just can't use that as a way to spearhead yourself into becoming a millionaire within 10 years.
And your family can inherit them. That's another thing. But one of the reasons, so the CRC, which is the United Ways Development Arm, which is very new, but they have been looking at the community land trust model as well. And that's one of the things, like, so you're going to get this, because I got this from Joni, like, oh, but then you can't create wealth. And I'm like, okay, but we can't afford home. Like, we don't know how we're going to retire. If we weren't spending so much on our housing, we could invest in a career, in our pension, in a business. There's other ways to create wealth. And one of the things that community land trusts do is they also like counsel people on other ways to invest wealth. So in that case, like if the CRC or someone like that were to do it, they would be managing the housing and the development, but also like in the case of rentals, you know, that housing, and the city would own the land. So yeah, I forgot, because that was one of the things that came up. They put that piece about the city building into their attainable housing plan, but then they said, oh, but the caveat is we would lose money from the sale of land. We would have to pay for maintenance, which I don't get that, because you're also charging rent, but we'd have to pay for the maintenance on these rentals, and we would lose property taxes. You don't lose property taxes on homes that you own. So they can actually, I mean, they would still be recouping property taxes as well. So I had meant to, thank you for bringing that up, Jason, because I had meant to mention that.
Yeah, no worries. It's just always chaos to hear someone's argument saying, well, you're not generating wealth by owning your home. Like, since when did having a roof be the main way of income today? Right? Like, my parents made more money by having a roof over their head than I will make in 5 years of working.
Yeah.
And they did that in 5 years of just having a roof.
Yeah.
I got to push this along a little bit. We're getting towards the end, and we still have a couple of questions left. Jeff, did you have a question? Jeff?
Did Mike go already?
No, Jeff's been waiting. Maybe Jeff can't hear me, Jeff? Well, let's do Mike then. Mike, did you have a comment?
Because this is the Perth County Sustainability Hub, and because Bill James Ebra of Climate Momentum is here, I wanted to remind people that there's a climate emergency, and the city of Stratford is supposed to be acting as though there's one, except that the proposals that are coming from Invest Stratford, not once do they mention energy, not once do they mention environment, not once do they mention the climate emergency. It's all about development, it's all about building. There's lots of ways to make owning a property way cheaper by building it much more affordably in terms of energy use. But that's not part of what they're asking. That's not part of what they're doing. And once again, the city of Stratford is just not paying attention to the fact that we're in a climate emergency.
And if our homes get damaged by some of the things that are happening because they weren't built to be resilient, that's a cost either on the city or on us. So it's important that we get that right, you know.
Jay Marie.
Just to comment back to what Nicole was saying, in Xinyi, the FOI, I think it pointed out that counselors were scared because of the number of emails they were getting. So I think volume for emails is a good thing. And in the procedural bylaw, I don't think we can put anything about them answering, but I know 24 hours is kind of the regular thing, and this council doesn't get that.
No.
However.
And last chance for Jeff. Going once.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just did you, Nicole? You mentioned that the provincial government had has there been a provincial definition of attainable housing since since the city's final report has come out that I missed, and thank you. I'm sure you're not the only one that was really shocked and appalled by the final report of the the interim report of the attainable housing program. But and I'm glad you mentioned the community renewal company, because that's the kind of thing that that's a pathway, I think, for some of these notions to be challenged about public land ownership, municipal land ownership being too hard or being too costly, or but I've asked Ryan Erb on a couple of occasions, like, what do you need? Like, do you just need like a booster group to highlight what you're doing, or because they are they're just sort of figuring out how to operate on the logistically, I think, but there's not. It's something that requires a deeper level of conversation about what the priorities, what the consequences of these kinds of developer-driven housing policies really are, and what the alternatives really are. And I can't say I was surprised, but I was very disappointed that Invest Stratford didn't really give them a fair hearing. But yeah, just if you could, has the provincial government actually issued a definition of attainable housing, or have they been as vague about it as the city was in the beginning?
Yeah, well, yeah, they've been even more vague because they put a number on it. The city just guessed at a number because they didn't have a number from the province. But our municipalities are creatures of the province. So, and they got provincial funding to do this whole, whatever this was, study. I use the term kind of loosely. So if the province, and that's why I'm surprised by their contradictory definition. If the province disagrees with what they say, I think the province is going to win the day, which is why I'm like, at this point, I think.
But is the province saying attainable is 80% or is up to 80%?
Saying that it is more than affordable, so it has to be above 80. So we're looking at 80 and 100. So because of that, I guess Invest Stratford split the middle and said 90.
Split the difference and said 90. Yeah.
Time being, until they hear a straight number from the province.
Well, of course, the province won't give one because it's the same thing as the city, the city. They're saying yes, we acknowledge there's a problem, but we're going to do we're going to do the thing that exacerbates the problem anyway. It's just
Makes you question where their interests lie. But all I know is that they're elected, and on the municipal level, we should have that should carry some weight if we decide to put the pressure down. Do you know what I mean? That should carry weight that you represent us. Yeah. The question is, how do we do that with the demonstrable force it's going to take? And we have a lot of counselors, and they ran on this stuff. So now is the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be worth, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I guess other people have questions, but maybe it would be worth going to, and I'm glad to hear you're going to be at Epic in a little bit, but maybe it'd be worth going to the local and to Brian and saying, let's have a information night about community land trusts. Like, let's activate the idea in the community so that it's actually a live thing, and it's not just up for the clerk or for Joni Gerber to say, yeah, but we looked at it and we're not interested. It'll be, it's about giving it some currency.
I'm going to be speaking with Mitch later this week, who's the director of the CRC. And like our plan right now, I mean, Taylor knows a lot about this stuff. She says she's going to try to help Jason and I make sure that we're looking at a tri-level approach, and we're looking at the types of housing that are best for Stratford. Right now, our approach, and we're welcoming feedback, is to sit down with every councillor, even the ones that we think are like fiscally conservative or whatever, because really this plan makes sense financially, as Jason and I pointed out. Individually, sit down with all the players, and then delegate, and also contact the press. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to hit it like all of those things. So there's like, you cannot ignore this. This is not the will of your people, and we will vote you out next time.
Make a big noise.
Yeah.
Somebody,
but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So Sharon took that note.
I took that note.
Yeah.
And I am really sorry, but our time is pretty well. We've run through all of our time, and we're going to have to stop now because we can't go on. I'd like to stay for another hour, but it's been really, really informative. I feel like I know more now. Because I find it very complicated, and I hope that there'll be a lot of people watching this on the site when we get it up, and I hope that they'll be able to maybe rewind and get the complicated stuff understood. So thank you so much for taking the time to come tonight, and we'll do a good job on the recording.